one of the questions that I ask everyone, one's two questions, and it has its own section on YouTube, and I clip it up, and I do that because I genuinely think it's useful for people going through their own careers, just to pick people's brains and kind of, learn, I guess, from others in a way that me personally although my uncle did own a business, I didn't really know him and I never got a chance to ask him about it. But my point is that I had to teach myself everything in a lot of ways, that I think this is actually quite useful for people, whether they kind of watch it or not. So can I ask you, what's the best piece of advice you've ever had?
So in terms of advice, I think I try and assimilate information from lots of different sources, and I do lots of reading and that kind of thing. But in terms of specific pieces of advice, I think when I joined the business that I was previously at, the founder of that business, who's a guy that we both know, Richard Hogg, I'd come from an environment where it was very much expected to put on a professional mask, if you like. And one of the first things that Richard told me was, be yourself, let down your guard, be vulnerable, let people see the real you, which is exactly what you were talking about before as well, Steve. But I think, and I took that on board, and that totally changed my style of how I interacted with other people in a professional setting. But I think by doing that totally also transformed the level of relationship that I was able to create with them. And it's still something that it's still something that I try and adhere to now, in terms of, not just sticking to the professional line of things, but actually, just asking the questions of, how are you? How's your family? What kind of stuff do you get up to? And once you know those people, that rapport just builds, and the like you say, the depth of the relationship that you get with those people is so much more than it would be if you were purely just talking to them about professional stuff. So for me, that's been something that's really changed my outlook, and I think has hopefully allowed me to be much more successful than I would have been otherwise.
No, but again, this is why I like to do this, because a lot of people do live streams, but they just focus on the purely business specifics of plug in something or they get paid to do it. As I want to actually get to know the people and the background and the story. Because, by the way, your wife has a very cool job that when you can say what she does, so I don't get it wrong, but I actually wanted to do something similar when I was probably about 18, 19, but instead went into engineering. Yeah. So what does your wife do?
So she's a freelance writer, essentially, which covers, a broad base of activities. But she writes about predominantly sort of beauty, lifestyle, and health.
So I didn't want to be a beauty writer, but the idea to write a column in a magazine, because she's written for some quite cool, famous magazines. But my point is, that at one point was almost not my dream job. I think what it was probably in the 90s, watching Sex and the City, and Carrie Bradshaw was a columnist and stuff. And but I think part of it is that same creative outlet is why I write my social media now. That's my kind of 1,300 characters. But I appreciate anyone that does that, because I know how difficult it is, but also it's kind of pretty cool. Anyway, back to the questions. And the other one, which can be any age, any background, any whatever you wish. If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
So I think the main thing that I would like to go back and impart on myself is that you've got, there's two things, I think, if I may be so bold as to
do whatever you want.
Give two answers. But the first one is that you've got to do it. You've got to do it yourself. Nobody's going to take responsibility for your success other than yourself. And I think if I'm critical around how I went about the early part of my career, part of me was probably expecting somebody to see potential in me and take a chance on me. And I've got to the stage now where you realize that, you're not in a movie. That's not going to happen. you've got to take responsibility for your own success, like I say. So that's one thing that I think I could have learned earlier on in my career. The second thing, it's a realization that came to me 4 or 5 years ago, I think, but it's that if there's something that you're not looking forward to doing, you're never going to feel like it, whether it's now or something that you're trying to put off for later in the day or later in the week, or however you're trying to kick that can down the road. The reality is you're never going to feel like it. So just front up and do it now, get it out of the way, because you'll feel a lot better once you have done.
Yeah.
And again, I think that was something that it took me time to learn through mistakes and experience, that I now try and adhere to every day, and just think, well, what is the stuff that I don't want to do? I'm going to get that out of the way first in my day, really. So,
but like related to that, so for instance, touch some wood, my business is going quite well and the clients are happy and that kind of thing. But still, I worked really hard last week, decided to take the weekend off. And for me, that's a big thing. Take 2 days off, which some people laugh at, but for me, that's a big thing. And then, but even on Monday morning, I was going into a client's office. I knew they were happy with me. I knew what we were doing, but still part of me was just a bit worried. And you can overthink and over worry on stuff when you really don't have to. But actually, as soon as I was in the office and I was up to speed again, you kind of realize actually it was fine. My point being exactly what you're saying. Often the thing that you worry about isn't as bad as what you think it's going to be. Or if you have made a mistake, because this is one of mine, is that if you have a mistake on anything, just as early and quickly as you can, just raise your hand. It was my fault. I've made a mistake with this. How do we fix it? And it's just, I think, no, I appreciate your honesty and your answers, and they're very cool.